This video is the result of me not sleeping last night and just deciding to get up at 4 a.m. And I jotted down some notes for about an hour, and now I'm going to record for a little bit. And I'm not sure exactly why I didn't sleep, but it was an unusual night. It's been an unusual few days. A lot of rain, a lot of cold weather, and really got the first real snow down here in Tennessee. Have about an inch that accumulated overnight outside, it looks like. So that's interesting. I was beginning to think, after a couple years of living down here, that it didn't snow in Tennessee. And compared to where I'm from, this really isn't too much. But I got stocked up on food. Yeah, so we'll see what happens. Anyway, let's go ahead and try to put this together, but bear with me. I am very tired, and my notes may not be complete. I may need to do a part two on this later on. If you feel like I've left some things out that should be addressed, or what have you, I'll try to remember to leave comments open on this video, and feel free to throw some stuff down there. I am always willing to, because my purpose here is to address things going on in the world and to talk about, worldview and doctrine related issues, current events, and deceptions and things like that. And so I'm always interested to get information from people who are listening to my videos as to, if there's avenues of investigation or inquiry or discussion that I need to pursue that maybe I'm not pursuing due to my own limited perspective, or in this case, my tiredness. Anyway, this video is going to be advice about marriage from a virgin. Yes, very awkwardly titled video from the get-go. And I will point out that this is not marriage advice necessarily, although some of it will apply. I guess if you're married, it is more advice about marriage. Marriage, relationships, sexuality. Should you wait to have sexual relations until marriage, and so forth. And yeah, as you can tell from the title, we're going to talk about some awkward things in this video. It will be YouTube appropriate, and it's probably fine for teens. Parents may just want, as with anything, to just listen to it first and make sure that it's something you're comfortable with your kids hearing. And with any sensitive topics, you should be discussing those things with your kids to make sure that they have an appropriate commentary on these things, and not that they're just thrown to the wolves and left to conclude whatever they want to conclude. I am just a guy, and to some degree this video is going to be my opinion, but it is also rooted in a Bible-believing Christian worldview, so keep that in mind as well. That's just where I'm coming from. So let's talk about the first awkward elephant in the room, so to speak. Yes, I am a virgin. I am 36 years old, and I've never been with a woman. And there's a reason for that. I'll kind of give you the brief rundown here. Or I guess you could say different reasons at different times. So I was raised conservative, Bible-believing Christian. And when I was younger, I took my faith very seriously. Unlike my peers, I was a very dutiful child. I didn't really get along with my peers. Generally speaking, I saw them as kind of, idiots, to put it bluntly. I tended to be friends more with my teachers than with my peers. And I did actually tend to listen to my teachers and my parents and my pastors and my Sunday school teachers, and to take their teaching to heart and try to live those things, and it has saved me a great deal of suffering and misery as compared to my peers in high school, and the choices that they have made and the direction that they have gone in their lives. So for my younger years, up until about the time that I went off to college, living the Christian faith, I'll just put it that way, or living with a Christian set of values protected me from a lot of things, and I stayed out of trouble. I did have some troubled college years where I, for a time, due to some things that happened in my life, I got involved in a cult group, and I really felt like God failed to protect me and like he was toying with me during that time in my life, and I became very bitter, and for a time I walked away from my faith. Although really, I think looking back on things now, I was never truly a born again Christian. I don't think. It is hard to tell sometimes. The heart is deceptive, and so it's sometimes hard to read ourselves. I think that I actually was born again in my late 20s after struggling a great deal. And when I say struggling, I never doubted that there was a creator God. I had studied those things in great detail, and I, from a very young age, was fascinated with Bible apologetics and studied that subject in great detail. I've always loved to read. Um, and so I've explored reason and logic and all manner of other avenues of inquiry, and I've always known that all the evidence points to the existence of a creator, and to the Bible being God's Word, and Jesus Christ being the Son of God. I just didn't like that very much in college and in my 20s. And there was a period there where I was very rebellious, and I actually was trying to disprove the existence of God to myself. And looking back, I see that that was a valuable time to me. I studied evolution and other things, a little bit of philosophy and stuff, but I was never really able to disprove God's existence. It's not something that is disprovable. But so in my youth, keeping to the teachings, the ways that I was taught kept me out of trouble, and I was a virgin through all those years. In my college years, I was very focused on my studies and on work, and I was just so busy I didn't have time for relationships really all that much, and so I again didn't get into any sexual shenanigans then either, and then after I was born again in my late 20s, I am actually trying to keep myself sexually pure for marriage at this point, and for the last, I don't know. Well, let's see. It would have been late 2016 that I accepted Christ as my Lord and Savior on a hospital bed in a state far from friends and family. Difficult time in my life. So 2016 until now, I'm trying to keep myself for marriage. It's a difficult struggle, and I will be honest, it's not fun. It's pretty hard. We live in probably the most sexualized society that this earth has ever seen. I am very thankful, though, that God has protected me throughout my life from making mistakes sexually, and from losing my virginity. Because I've seen in the lives of my peers the destructive baggage that comes from having sexual partners outside of marriage. I know many people who are single mothers, and they have kids with one, two, three different men who, fathered children and didn't stick around to actually be fathers, dads in the lives of those kids, and now those women are, single mothers. Very difficult job. I know men who, were in relationships and had kids unexpectedly, and it changed the entire course of their lives. And sometimes there's child support and things like that, and all this baggage, and then there's emotional baggage as well. Two people might have premarital sex. One of them's just playing around, and one of them's looking for a serious relationship, but then it doesn't last because they have different priorities going into it, and there's a tearing there. It's a destructive process for one or both people involved there. I've been spared from a lot of that baggage, from the physical baggage, from Sometimes there's diseases and things like that that go along with living promiscuous lifestyles. Let me say something here. Does being a virgin make me less valuable as a person? Because it is something that's, joked about and mocked and looked down on. Um, no, it does not. It doesn't make me less valuable as a person. And we see in the scriptures that there were people in the Bible who they were virgins. Daniel and his friends in the book of Daniel. So the Jewish nation was conquered, and the best and brightest young people were taken into captivity in Babylon and groomed to be public servants. But Daniel and his friends were probably eunuchs. They were young boys, and they were most likely castrated. Because, after all, the one in charge of them in the book of Daniel was the prince of the eunuchs. Um, then we have the Ethiopian eunuch in the New Testament, who was converted by Philip and then took the gospel back to Ethiopia and was likely responsible for the very early conversion of much of that nation to Jesus Christ. So these are men who we have testimony of them today, thousands of years after they lived their lives. They were valuable people. They had a tremendous impact. They may never have fathered children of their own, but they lived lives of importance, of import, of influence. And then, of course, we have Jesus Christ. He didn't come to establish an earthly lineage. He never married. He didn't have children. He came here to be about his Father's business, to be the mediator or go-between between humanity and God, to reconcile us to our Creator, and to die on the cross, a substitutionary death for sins. And in order to accomplish those things, he gave up a lot of earthly pleasures and comforts and blessings. And he didn't have a family. He was a virgin. And Jesus Christ is the most famous and the most influential person who ever lived. So does being a virgin make me, or you, if you are, less valuable as a person? No, it certainly does not. And let me say this too, so far as I know, everything in a mechanical, physical sense is working right, and when I meet the right person, I'll be ready. And I if I get married and have a wife, I won't be a virgin anymore after that point. So it's not like being a virgin's a perpetual state of being. I'm not going to let people shame me or rush me into making a potentially life-destroying mistake for, a momentary good time. That would be a foolish decision. If anything, we don't talk about abstinence enough in sex ed programs and in society. It's just safe sex, safe sex, safe sex. There's no such thing as safe sex. It is a myth. There's no such thing as safe sex from a mechanical perspective. You can't prevent malfunctions in contraceptive techniques and devices. No contraceptive is 100% perfect. Women can be on the pill and still get pregnant. You can, use a condom and still get pregnant. You can break a condom or, whatever. There can be a defect and it can leak. Any number of things. There's no such thing as safe sex from a physical, mechanical perspective, and there's no such thing as safe sex from a health perspective in terms of disease, and there's no such thing as safe sex emotionally either, because God created that to be a spiritual connection, and there are bonds that are created there. And if you're having promiscuous sex, you're creating these bonds and then ripping these bonds and then creating these bonds with someone else and ripping these bonds, and there's a desensitization that comes there, a callousness of the spirit that is the result of that type of lifestyle. let's carry on. So, am I uh, qualified to give advice about marriage? Well, let me put it this way. I'm certainly not the most qualified. The most qualified person would be someone who has been successfully married a long time, so they'll have that first-hand experience. But I will point out there's lots of unqualified people online giving advice about marriage and relationships, and they're completely unqualified. They're completely unqualified because they've never actually successfully had a marriage. And one example that I'm just going to pull out there and throw out there, because he kind of puts himself out there, is Andrew Tate. So Andrew Tate is what the Bible would call a whoremonger, or in other words, he's a pornographer, a digital pimp. Um, he is a deeply unhappy man. He's had many relationships, but I don't think he's successfully married right now. And he's been deeply hurt by women, and you can just read that on him. It's as much as he shows off his fancy cars and his money and his nice houses and all the women, the beautiful women that are hanging off him or in his company all the time, he is a very sad person. He's a misogynist. He's an example of what I've called the seesaw effect in other videos, where something happens to people and it takes them to it causes them to go to another extreme. So he's had some relationships not work out, and he's gotten hurt, and unfortunately he has allowed that to twist his view of women, and he's become very misogynistic and very dark in his outlook and perspective on marriage and relationships now because of that. So, compared to Andrew Tate, am I qualified to give advice about marriage? I would say so, because I haven't messed up relationships as horrifically as he has. Um, so, even an armchair theorist is better than someone who fails and fails and fails and fails and can't succeed at something. So I will say this, my family tend to have long, successful marriages. So Emerson once wrote that the American scholar learns by three different means. Firstly, by reading books, especially the Bible. Secondly, by observing nature, especially human nature. And finally, by doing things firsthand and learning through that experience. So when it comes to marriage and relationships, I have two out of those three. I do not have any first-hand marriage experience, and I won't until that happens, and that's fine. But I do have a lifetime of reading on every topic under the sun. I've read thousands of books, and I've read some books on marriage. I probably have not read 30 to 40 books that would be required to make me an expert. I'll just be honest about that. But I've read a handful, at least. And I have spent my lifetime observing good marriages in my family. My grandparents, my parents, and my aunts and uncles especially, but now I'm also seeing my cousins. Although I am one of the, I guess I'm kind of in the middle of the pack actually age-wise when it comes to the cousins. But more it's the older generations that I've been observing most of my life. Most of my cousins haven't been married for a tremendously long time, or my siblings. I do have two sets of grandparents who happily married, and I will point out that the vast majority of my family members did things in the right order. They first married, then they had kids. A few haven't. A few, it's not of the younger cousins right now. It's kind of unclear whether they will go the route of marriage or not. I guess we'll kind of see as things go. But the vast majority of my family, as I said, did do things the right way. So I have two sets of grandparents. They were married once to each other, and my parents have been married my entire life. I have 7 sets of aunts and uncles. Each of my well, let me think about that. 7 sets. No, that would be 6 sets. 6 sets of aunts and uncles. Sorry, my math skills are going to be off because I am very tired, have not slept. But 6 sets of aunts and uncles. And of those, only one's been divorced and remarried, and that remarriage has actually lasted at this point probably about a decade, longer, longer than a decade. I want to say 20 years now, if I recall correctly. I think that second marriage has lasted 20 years. And then I have two married siblings and 8 married cousins. Most of them have kids. Not all, but most of them. Um, my family, by and large, are pretty old fashioned conservative people. Not all of them. Some of the younger cousins have, in terms of their worldview, have gone aside out of the way, so to speak, but it is what it is. But I just say that to say that I have had lots of good, stable marriages to observe, and so I do, in a sense, have some experience due to that. And so you can, take my thoughts for what they are. They may be a flawed perspective, and there may be some nuggets of wisdom in there as well. So, as with anything, you take the good and leave the bad. So, what is marriage? Well, the Christian view of it is that it was established by God, and there are actually 3 persons in a marriage. Because it is a covenant between a man and wife, but it is before God. Um, and Well, there's different views on that, but in a healthy biblical marriage, you have it can be illustrated, I guess, as a triangle is a good way to put it. So you have God at the apex of that triangle, and then you have the man and his wife. And if the man and his wife are each seeking God and developing that relationship, then by extension, as they near the apex of that triangle, they are also becoming closer to each other in their marriage relationship. So biblically, man leaves his parents, cleaves to his wife, and they become one flesh or one organism. Now, obviously, in this fallen world, there's going to be some difficulties with that because they are actually 2 different people now sharing one life together. And so, yeah, they're going to have their different preferences and things like that. And there's going to be little tensions and friction and things like that, difficulties that will need to be worked through. Marriage takes work. It's often difficult. I guess a bonfire is a good way to think of it. Every once in a while, you're going to have to throw more fuel on there and kindle those flames to keep it going. It's going to take effort. It's not going to be smooth sailing all the time. And that is why part of the traditional marriage vows is for better or for worse, in sickness and in health and so forth. Because there is going to be better, sure, but there's also going to be worse. There are going to be difficult times. And a biblical marriage is intended to weather all of those difficulties. If it doesn't, if it's not worthwhile during the difficult times, it's not worthwhile at all. It's a fair weather relationship. What was the point? The whole point is to have a support structure there when things are difficult. Anyway, the Bible is very sex positive. This is something that a lot of people have incorrect about Christianity. They think that that sex in the Bible is only for pleasure, or sorry, only for reproduction. Got that backwards. That is incorrect. The Bible actually teaches sex for reproduction. Yes, of course. Children are an heritage of the Lord and a gift from God. But the Bible does teach sex for pleasure as well. The Bible is actually very clear that sex is to be regular, that it is a duty that the husband and wife render to each other. And what that means is the Bible actually lays out only one exception that I'm aware of specifically for abstaining from sex within the marriage relationship, and that is the husband and wife each mutually consent to take some time off from sex for prayer and fasting. Now, I think we can reasonably infer that there might be some other reasons why husband and wife might not have regular sex in a marriage relationship. Health reasons, for example, or just things being too busy. I mean, life gets in the way. But the Bible is clear that sex is to be a regular and a regular thing in the marriage relationship, and the reason for that is the physical bond. It's the physical emanation of that one flesh joining of the husband and wife. I had one pastor put it this way: sex is the glue that holds a godly marriage together. And so ask yourself, how strong do you want your marriage to be? If you want it to be strong, you should be having regular sex, probably daily. It's just the way it is. That connection needs to be there. Let's see here. And logically, if you think about it, this makes a lot of sense. So humans don't have mating seasons like a lot of animals do. Human beings can have sex any time of year, and they can have children any time of year. That makes us, to my knowledge, pretty unique as compared to the animal. Now understand, in the biblical view of things, human beings were not animals. The world tries to condition us and tell us that we are and that we can behave like animals, and that's completely okay. That is not true. We are material beings, or we have a material element to us, but we're also created in God's image and have a spiritual side to us as well. And we're held to a higher standard than the animals are. Let me just put it that way. But the Bible does teach sex for pleasure. If you doubt me on that, go read the book Song of Solomon. It's about sexual love in marriage, and there's a lot of symbolism built into that as well. But there's some sexually overt things in that book of the Bible. Marriage is intended to be one man, one woman for life. I know this isn't very popular today, but truth and popularity are not the same thing. Truth is not always popular. This works practically, as well as being what God has commanded. Here's why it works practically. So when you have a marriage as one man and one woman, all of their kids are going to be either boys or girls. Simple biology, not complicated here, I hope. And the boys can look at dad for an example of how they should be as a man, and they can look at mom as an example of what they should be looking for as a future partner. And likewise, the daughters, their girls, can be looking at mom as an example of what a woman should be, and they can be looking at dad as an example for, okay, that's the kind of man I should be looking for a husband someday. That is why one man, one woman works, practically speaking. Marriage. There are many counterfeits of marriage, but they're not legitimate marriages. Group marriages, not a marriage. Marriage of different combinations of genders, not a marriage. Marriage of a human and an animal, not a marriage. Marriage of a human and an object, not a marriage. And it doesn't matter what government says. Not a marriage. It's one man, one woman for life. There is a spiritual meaning behind marriage. If you're not a Christian, you may not be tremendously interested in this, but marriage is actually an image or a picture of God's relationship to his church. And the church is described as the bride of Christ. And there's a role there. So the man is the head in the marriage. He is the spiritual leadership, just like Christ is the head or spiritual leadership over the church. And so leads, protects, guides, cherishes, nurtures, and so forth. There's a lot that we could go into here. I'm not necessarily looking to do a deep dive into biblical marriage and full Bible study on that. We're just kind of hitting the key points that maybe you've never heard before. Maybe some of my audience have never heard before. So divorce. Divorce was never intended by God, but it was allowed by Moses because of the hardness of human hearts, especially, I believe, people's unwillingness to forgive their partners. A lot of marriages fail because of this, because husbands and wives can't forgive each other. They hold grudges and they let those things fester. The Bible says, and this is a biblical principle, great advice for a marriage, let not the sun go down upon your wrath. Don't let things build up between you and your partner. That will destroy your marriage over time. If you have something against your partner, you need to clear that up before you go to bed. Let not the sun go down upon your wrath. Now, you know, well, as I've said, I'm not married. But you might just have to agree to disagree about certain things. You might have to come up with some means of negotiation within the marriage relationship. I've heard couples coming up with rules where, uh, if the couples are in disagreement about something, but one doesn't necessarily want to talk about it in a given moment, they have the ability to defer that and say, hey, I don't want to talk about this, but it can't be deferred, forever. It's just like, well, let's talk about this at such and such a time, and they can agree to put it off instead of necessarily having to deal with it in the moment when they're both not ready to address that and things like that. There's a lot of give and take and mutual respect like that has to go on in a marriage relationship. You got to be careful about things like timing. Make sure both people are ready to share their viewpoints and talk something over, and that one partner is not getting blindsided and things like that. Some of you who are married know more about that than I do. So let's see, what destroyed marriage as an institution in the West? Free love did, or that's basically code for promiscuous sex. It's not love and it's not free. There's dire consequences, and it's not love at all. It's very selfish. It's just pleasure seeking, and treating other people like objects. Arguably, promiscuous sex was the original gateway drug, and if you look around you now, you probably have noticed that we live in a society of addicts, and you're wondering, well, how did all that start? Back with free love. And then, of course, drug use and music, which can be a drug as well, kind of were all wrapped up in the love and peace, hippie movement, and all that stuff. Rock and roll, by the way, is a euphemism. Sex in a car. Probably some of you old school characters know that a little better than I do. And something we do need to mention, sexual activity and pornography, they are addictive drugs. They release powerful chemicals in the brain that are as addictive as crack cocaine. So, think about that as you look around and observe society around us. We do live in a society of addicts. Promiscuous sex is like living on junk food, while faithful monogamy is a balanced banquet. Studies have been done, and married people are more sexually satisfied overall than those who are not faithfully married. Which makes sense. Sex was intended by God to be a bond between husband and wife. It is that glue that holds a marriage together. And the best sex is going to be sex between two partners who they've been faithful to each other, they love each other dearly, and they have invested time in the relationship, and spent time getting to know each other intimately. Sex in a marriage should just get better and better as the partners grow together and learn more about each other. Pornography is a blight on society. So my order of thought in this video might be a little bit disjointed, because as I said, it's early in the morning. I have not slept. Put these notes together. Um, so just try to bear with me. The flow might be a little rough. There's some good thoughts in here. It just might not be structured the best. And it is what it is. But pornography is a blight on society. So a note about something very interesting. So TikTok, it's actually a Chinese platform. And in China, it is used as an educational platform for students, teaching them, different things about math, science, and stuff like that. Here in the U.S., TikTok is a medium for purveying pornography and smut. Why is that? Because China's using that as a tool for their own society, but a weapon against ours. Why? Because pornography is addictive. It's destructive to the family, which is the core basic unit, foundational unit of society, the nuclear family. And pornography and promiscuous sex and these things are destructive of the family. So China is promoting these destructive materials here in the U.S. because it is weakening us, and they're not letting TikTok be used for the same things in their own country. That's really interesting. And there has been an ongoing conversation about whether TikTok should be banned in the U.S. The answer is yes, it should. It's a destructive weapon, propaganda tool that the Chinese are using against us. Anyway, moving on. Pornography and smut should not be copyrightable materials. I have heard some people put this idea out there, and I strongly agree with it. And here's the reason why. So, copyrightable materials. As soon as something, a work of literature, or a textbook, or an instruction manual, as soon as something is copyrighted, that means that the full weight and force of the legal system is behind it and protects it. And so understand that that means that the courts and the judges and the legal system, which are funded by taxpayer dollars, which is coming from the people's pockets, that is behind copyrights and the copyright system. So if pornography and smut are being copyrighted, the people's resources are going into supporting pornography and smut and protecting that stuff and allowing that stuff to perpetuate. Does that seem like something that society should be investing in? No. So I do agree with those who say that the copyright laws in this country should be revamped and pornography and smut should not be covered by copyrights. The U.S. produces 75% of pornography. The free love movement began in the USA. By the way, these are characteristics of the biblical entity Mystery Babylon. Keep in mind, Mystery Babylon has made all the nations of the world drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. Now, historically, that has been spiritualized to say that it's spiritual fornication and that it's the Roman Catholic Church we're talking about. I don't think so. And more and more I'm seeing the need to make a video about this, that I do think that the pinnacle nation of Mystery Babylon is the United States, and that when you start really looking at the characteristics here, it's an inescapable conclusion. It is the USA that is spreading this poison of pornography to the world, and this free love movement. The destruction of marriage is catastrophic to society because marriage and the family, as I mentioned, are the core units. The nuclear family, they're the core basic unit, foundational unit of society. The Annie Casey Foundation has statistics saying that 2/3 of black children are raised in single-parent households now. And this is one of the big unspoken truths of reality here in the United States, and one of the reasons why society is the way that it is. 2/3 of black children are raised in single-parent households. And generally when we say single-parent households, we mean that mom or grandma is raising those kids. What's happening here? Well, black women are having children, and the dads just aren't sticking around to be parents in their kids' lives. It's sad. It's a bad situation. What this means, though, is that young black men in these situations, they grow up angry because they don't know their fathers. Their male role models in their lives are their peers, and they become disproportionately involved in crime. And there is a cycle, a self-perpetuating cycle, where they are then more likely to get women pregnant out of marriage and then be parents or father children who are going to grow up in single parent households themselves. And this is the reason why blacks are proportionately or disproportionately involved in violent crime in this country, and why there are many other issues in the black community. It's because the black family has essentially collapsed. 2/3 of black children are raised in single parent households. And it's a terrible problem, and it's also a preview of where the rest of the country, the other demographics, are going, because they are catching up. Whites are right behind the blacks, heading in the same direction. And I think Asians and Latinos are actually behind whites in that their families are stronger, and more kids, more Latino kids and Asian kids are growing up in families where both parents are present, in households where both parents are present. All right, so here's a few thoughts for the ladies, and then I'll have some thoughts at the end for men. So society is conditioning young women to basically be prostitutes. This is not a good thing. It's actually a terrible thing. Liberation of women has actually just enslaved women, taken advantage of them and made them more vulnerable. There's so many different ways we could go with this. Well, let's just keep on with my notes, I guess, and see. We'll probably hit on some of these things as we go along. So women, by nature, are more easily deceived than men. This even goes back to the fall of man in the Garden of Eden. Keep in mind that Adam gets credit for being the first sinner because he willfully chose to sin, while Eve was merely deceived. So, an example of women and deception. Why is it that women, for example, are supposed to shave their legs? And we're told in Western society that women shaving their legs is, beautiful or attractive. Well, guess who came up with that? Razor and cosmetic companies like Gillette. And they came up with this as a standard of beauty so that they can make more money off of women. And now that market's been saturated and pretty much all women are buying, razors and whatnot, now they're trying to get men to be more, to primp and to shave more as well, because it's an untapped market. But that's an example of how women can be manipulated for a particular outcome, in that case, in order to make money. Here's another manipulation of women that's pretty common, that nudity is art. It's just art, baby. Take your clothes off. No, ladies, you would be better served keeping your clothes on and keeping that beauty for someone who will truly love you, instead of just showing it off to everyone. Women do have a natural desire to be admired, but it's something that, everything has a proper boundary where it's good, wholesome, and appropriate. And outside of that boundary, it becomes something vile and disgusting. So in the case of sex and sexuality, within the bounds of marriage, the Bible actually says the marriage bed is pure and undefiled in all. Anything goes in the marriage bed as long as nobody is coming away from sex within marriage feeling degraded in any way. And it's between a husband and wife what they want to do and what they want to experiment with, and that's completely fine. Like I said, the Bible has a very sex positive. The Bible's a very sex positive book. Um, but then where things get out of bounds and start becoming ugly is premarital sex or adultery. Someone is married but they're having sex outside of their marriage. That's not the way things are supposed to work. That has a destructive effect on families. That has a destructive effect on kids. That has a destructive effect on the individual's body, because the Bible also says that promiscuity has a physical toll that it is taking on the body. What exactly the Bible means by that, I'm not sure, but there is a strong implication in the scriptures that we're talking about sexually transmitted diseases. But then there is also a spiritual degrading that happens there on a level that well, anyway. That's a great deception. But it's a way that women are exploited, because if you tell people that, if you tell women, I just want to take some classy photographs of you for art's sake, it sells a lot more easily than, a bunch of horny guys want to ogle your naked body. Although these days women are so trashy that that latter line works just as well quite often, sadly. Let's see here. C.S. Lewis wrote that women are more naturally monogamous than men. That may have been true in his day. They ought to be more naturally monogamous than men. It is actually in women's best interest to be monogamous, especially once kids come onto the scene, because a woman having to raise children by herself, that's the hardest job in the world, being a single mother. It's definitely not in a woman's best interest to have children with several different men who don't stick around to help her raise those children. That is not good for her. That is not good for those children. That is not good for society. Let's see here. Society conditioning women, going back to that thought. There's a lot of money for attractive women who are willing to sell their bodies, is the bottom line. Whether we're talking about, sex sells, whether we're talking musicians who are encouraged to present themselves in a sexy fashion in order to sell more music, whether we're talking actresses or actors who are, using their sex appeal to further their career, or whether we're talking more overt things like the rise of OnlyFans and other pornographic outlets. So OnlyFans, for those of you who aren't aware, it's basically it's like YouTube, I guess, but it's for filming explicit adult acts, and for creators, and I use that term loosely, to make money off of those acts. So like YouTube, you can have a channel, you can put videos up, and you can monetize that stuff and make money off of it. I was reading some years ago an article about a young woman who, from a very early age, as a girl, she wanted to be in the adult entertainment industry. And so all through her teens, that's what she was waiting for. And then when she turned 18, she started an OnlyFans account, and on her very first day, after her first performance, she became a millionaire. She made her first $1 million that first day, on her 18th birthday, when she did her first show. There's a lot of money out there for women who are willing to sell themselves. That's terrible. It's a terrible thing. But that's the world we live in, unfortunately. We live in a world where people worship money and they're not looking at the bigger picture and all the things that they're losing. Really, they're selling their souls in a way. Now, it's not to say that people like this are beyond redemption, because they're not. There was actually a prostitute, or I should say an ex-prostitute, because she turned away from that lifestyle. There's an ex-prostitute in Jesus' lineage, Rahab, and you can look that up and study that. There is hope for people like this who become trapped in these lifestyles. But it is a pretty terrible and disturbing thing, and it's a sad thing to see. Recently, I was just seeing a story about there's some model who has made $50 million on OnlyFans selling her body. Basically, a high-priced prostitute, and she's very proud of that. But at the end of the day, what are you so proud of? It's just money. It's a chain that the government uses to keep us all in line. I mean, yeah, it can buy you some cool stuff and, a good standard of living and whatnot, but is it worth? And I guess this is the thing. These people are raised without any kind of real value system. I guess when you're raised with a pure Darwinian perspective, money's the only thing you've got to live for. You don't have any integrity or anything beyond that. It's really sad to see. On the flip side, in contrast to those who sell themselves for money, the greatest satisfaction for most women will actually come from finding a good man and building a family together with him. And that's I am sure I'm about. If any feminists find this video, God help me, I'm doomed. But I'll be hunted down and ruthlessly exterminated. But understand that our Creator is not a fool. He created things with purpose. Humanity has a purpose. One of the purposes for humanity is to be fruitful and multiply, and male and female each have a role in that. And understand that when it comes to sexual satisfaction, well, let me just put it this way. God equipped men to complement women in many different ways, physically, emotionally, to protect women, to lead women. Men are to be the head of the household and the spiritual leader in the family. And there are benefits for women to submitting to that plan, and to men, for that matter. Submitting to God's plan for the family does not make women inferior to men. Let's just be clear about that. A woman's role, generally speaking, is going to be a suitable, the Bible calls it a helpmeet, or a fitting or suitable helper for a man. That's, for most women, that is what their role is going to be. And it's going to vary from marriage to marriage what a suitable or fitting helper is going to look like. For example, I believe it was the Pasteurs, were a husband-wife scientist duo. It's not always going to look like a traditional mom stays at home and raises the kids. It won't necessarily always look like that. There are going to be some couples who don't necessarily, who may not have kids for any number of reasons, and so they will devote themselves to other endeavors. And you might actually have situations where, the wife is a more talented and renowned scientist or whatever than the husband is, even though they're both working together as a team in some endeavor. That's completely fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Every marriage is going to have to find its own balance in that, and I don't really get to judge or project on that. However, there is a pattern that God has created, and that is that the male is going to be the head of the household and the spiritual leader there. And because, in that relationship, someone has to be in charge when it comes right down to it. Now, a wise man is not going to rule over his wife with a heavy, harsh hand. He's going to have a little bit of wisdom in that. and trust her, and they'll work through things together as a team. But the greatest satisfaction for most women will come from finding a good man and building a family together with him. And I want to say something on that. One reason I think that the transgender movement and homosexuality have taken off so much, and they are detrimental things to society, definitely. They are part of the depopulation agenda. I've talked about that in another video. I think the one reason that they've taken off is because a lot of women don't feel like they're very feminine and attractive as a woman. And likewise, I think a lot of men feel like they're not very masculine or attractive as a man. And so there's this thought, well, what if I was born in the wrong body? Maybe I should be the other gender. No, that's not the case. Understand that, there are a number of confusing factors in our world right now. We have a lot of hormones in our food, hormones in our water, hormones and other substances, chemicals in our air that are affecting human growth and development and things like that. But understand the spectrum of attraction itself is pretty broad too. Unfortunately, Hollywood presents this idea of Barbie is the perfect woman, and I don't know, Dwayne the Rock Johnson is the perfect man, or maybe Arnold Schwarzenegger. I don't know. It varies a little bit. I guess Dwayne is more this generation's Arnold Schwarzenegger. But my point is, yeah, the media presents these paragons, if you want to put it that way, of humanity that are sort of like, the supermodels or the bodybuilders. And that's what a man should be or look like. Well, you got to understand, not every marriage is going to look exactly the same, although biblically speaking, it is going to be one man, one woman for life. That's what a marriage is. Likewise, every man is not going to be looking exactly identical. I don't have to live up to Arnold Schwarzenegger as my measure of a man, and it would be foolish of me to try. And actually, I think in his life he's taken some things to extremes that are unwise. And I would not want to go down that path. And I'm not going to. Sorry. My point here is that not everyone's cut out to be a macho man. I certainly am not. And likewise, not every woman is going to be a super feminine, cute little gorgeous thing either. Life is tough, and there's, let me put it this way. Look back at photos from around the Civil War, or, from the beginning of photography and stuff. And you have family photos with, these big families and stuff. Plenty of homely women who were not particularly attractive managed to find good men and have happy marriages and have big happy families. I'm just going to say that. When it comes to attraction, physical beauty, yeah, I mean, it's a thing. Physical attraction is important to a degree, but someone's personality, someone's character, these things are far more important than appearance. And so don't feel like you have to conform to someone else's image of femininity or image of masculinity. That I think that is creating a lot of dissatisfaction within our young people, and because they're not anchored and they don't have a system of moral values or a solid worldview, then they're falling prey to these the homosexual and the transgender agendas. Some other thoughts for ladies. Ladies, modesty is beautiful, believe it or not. And going in line in that vein with physical beauty not necessarily being the most important form of beauty. This is an important thought. And I'm reminded of it when I think back to my high school years. I remember, all the girls in high school who were, and in middle school, who were considered to be the hottest, most beautiful girls, each year or whatever. And I remember all those gals, and for the most part, with the exception of one, who she was nice enough, just kind of dumb, made a lot of bad decisions that damaged her life. Um, but most of the rest of them, yeah, they were really beautiful young women, but I really disliked them because they were just despicable people. They were arrogant. They treated other people as if they were inferior because they weren't as beautiful. Uh, and they relied on their beauty to get them things instead of actually pursuing excellence. Um, in other words, they weren't competent. Instead, they just flirted around a lot and tried to manipulate people. That is not attractive at all. Um, so, ladies, you might be discouraged that you were not, granted with natural beauty like some of the other women around you were. Understand that natural beauty is going to fade away. That's why the Bible says that favor is deceitful and beauty is vain. Favor being, whether someone likes you or not. Um, so, emotion and beauty, these things pass away. But the Bible says that a woman that fears the Lord, she shall be praised. In other words, there are lasting character qualities that are more valuable and more praiseworthy than physical beauty and emotion. So, some things that are beautiful. Modesty is beautiful. That is something that I don't want a floozy for a wife. I want a woman, sure, I'd like a beautiful woman. Of course, attraction is important to a degree. But I want a woman who is modest and who doesn't flaunt that beauty. Because, well, for one reason, I don't want to be having to fight off hordes of men all the time. That would be tedious. I don't want people to get the impression that my wife is a cheap or easy woman or promiscuous because of how she carries herself or shows herself. Modesty is a virtue that's not being taught these days, but it's very important. And it's very possible for a woman to be both physically attractive and modest at the same time. There are many styles that are very fetching, very attractive, very appealing, but without being trashy and provocative and promiscuous. Um, anyway, other things that are beautiful. Being natural is beautiful. Being healthy is beautiful. And when I say natural, I don't know who came up with the idea that gluing plastic chips to your fingers was attractive. I've never liked fake nails. That is a huge turnoff for me. Um, I come from a family of ladies who keep their hands very neatly and naturally, and that is very attractive. Anyway, that would be another case of industry, the beauty industry, setting these standards so that they can charge women, $40 for a manicure to get these fake plastic chips glued to their fingers. Okay. Anyways, healthy is beautiful, and virtue is beautiful. Virtue being things like humility, kindness, honesty, loyalty. When it comes to character, like attracts like. So if you are a person, and this goes for men and for women, if you're a person who you struggle in relationships and you find you're always attracting these so-called low-value partners who they're not faithful, they cheat on you all the time, well, ask yourself, are you the kind of person whose character is attracting other people of like character? If you want someone who's humble and kind, are you humble and kind? Do you want someone who's honest and loyal? Are you honest and loyal? And then, of course, you also do need to tune yourself to be pursuing the right kind of people. And what's interesting about this is sometimes life circumstance tunes people. whether they like it or not, just life experience and hard knocks. What I mean by that is I get chased by women periodically. It's happened 8 or 10 times in my life, and I find that the type of woman who's attracted to me or who chases me tends to be single mothers, quite a lot now. And I think the reason for that is so I'm a slightly above average looking guy. I'm very hardworking, very diligent, very serious, and I take care of people around me. Um, I don't know that these things are really. I'm not an exciting, high adrenaline, super buff kind of character. I'm not flashy. I'm not macho at all, um, unless I absolutely have to be. I'm not the kind of person. Hmm, well, let me just put it this way, because this is my conclusion on things. I think, younger women who are looking for excitement or a good time, they're not going to look at guys like me. But guys like me are very attractive to women who are looking for stability and a family man. And I think that's why, after life happens, after a woman has had fun for a while and then maybe made some mistakes, had her heart broken, or had some unexpected kids come along, then that sort of retunes her and changes her priorities a little bit. It probably would have been better if she'd had the right priorities to begin with and found the right guy to settle down with, instead of getting things all muddled up and out of order and really just causing herself a lot of heartache and creating a lot of baggage. Um, let's see. Some people say, oh, my significant other lets me do whatever I want. Um, or even, my significant other doesn't care if I sleep with other people. Understand that what that says to me is that you don't have a real relationship there. That other person doesn't really care about you, and they're probably doing the same things behind your back, with or without you knowing it. Um, when you say that you have an open relationship, that's not really. That's just friends. It's an arrangement of convenience. There's no such thing as an open marriage. It's basically just friends with benefits. There's no commitment there. There's no foundation there. There's nothing real there. It's just going to last as long as it's fun. And I would say be leery of someone who doesn't want to get married. He just wants to hang out in a long-term relationship forever. To me, that smacks of someone who they're waiting for a better option to come along to replace you, but they're just not ever going to tell you that to your face. So that's what I think of long-term commitment, so-called, versus marriage. It's often a commitment of convenience. Now, I can understand these days there's fewer and fewer people who actually believe in biblical marriage anyways. So you do sometimes have couples that end up together long term. That is a troubling thing though, because you got to ask, what is the foundation for that relationship? If it's not biblical marriage, or marriage as God ordained it, is there is there any kind of higher commitment to that relationship, or will it crumble when it's faced with certain life difficulties, which will certainly eventually come given enough time? Anyway, the best advice that I can give to a young woman, and this is advice I would give to my sister, although my sister took heed to my parents' advice and she did well for herself. She found a good young man who really cares about her. They have one kid and one on the way. Very happy for her. Um, but if I were the one who had to give advice to my sister or to a daughter, here's the advice that I would give. So listen up, young ladies, if you want to save yourself some heartache. You really should be saving yourself for marriage. Not only does this make you more valuable because it shows that you have a measure of self-control and that you're waiting to be loyal to someone. And by the way, I will say this, that men, young men, you should also be waiting until marriage to have sex. But young women in particular, this is a protection to you. If you make it clear that you are not putting out until marriage, understand that as soon as young men find that out about you, that immediately is going to drive away the wrong kind of guys that you don't want to end up with anyway, the ones that just want to have sex with you and then abandon you. If you are trying to find a good man, that is absolutely 100% where you should start. Just make it very clear from the outset that you are waiting until marriage to have sexual relations. That is going to narrow out so many of the bad actors that you don't want in your life anyway. It's going to save you a lot of trouble. Trust me on that. I know how men think. I am a man. Trust me on that. That's going to drive away a lot of those guys that just aren't serious. There's a trend right now with ladies. They just want to sleep. I'm generalizing here. This isn't all of them, certainly. But a lot of young women just want to sleep around and have fun for a couple decades and then maybe settle down when they're 40. Understand that that entire way of living, biologically, you've just destroyed your potential as a woman. By the time you're 40, your childbearing years are over. By that point in time, maybe you had kids accidentally, but with subpar partners or partners who didn't stick around. They weren't people that you would have chosen to be the father of your children, but now you're stuck with all of that baggage. And then you have to ask yourself, what are you going to have in exchange for your best years? So if you're spending those first 20 years, from 20 to 40, those first 20 years approximately of adulthood, just having fun, just sleeping around, just having good experiences, what are you exchanging for that? What are you getting in return for that? Because you're giving up your youth, which is time, and time is critical. It is foundational to a long-term marriage relationship. That's time that you could be investing in a marriage and a family. It's time you're not going to have if you want to get things started at age 40. You're also giving up your beauty because, yeah, looks fade. It doesn't take long, especially for women. I think men stay. I've heard that men hit their optimal peak later in life than women do. Women, well, I don't know. It depends on who you talk to. It's probably before 40, actually, according to many people, but it's going to vary based on genetics and things like that, and it's not an entirely objective measure, but anyway, beauty fades, ability to bear children, of course, and then youth, along with the energy of youth and the time. So what are you trading all that for when you live that way? And when I say that way, I mean what I've just described, that you sleep around and have fun for 20 years and then settle down maybe when you're 40. Well, you're trading all that for pleasure, money, or memories, I guess. But is any of that really worth what you've given up? Your youth, the time that you could have invested in a relationship and in a family, beauty that you could have shared and given to someone who really loved and cared about you, your ability to bear children with a partner of your choice, that whole chosen lifestyle, the pleasure seeking, and maybe you'll settle down at some point, that is it's going to bring a lot of grief. And anyway, let's see here. So premarital sex is a major contributor to failed marriages. Why? Well, look at it from where I'm at right now. I've never had a sexual partner. What this means for me is that when I eventually find the right one, the person that I truly love and want to spend the rest of my life with, I will have no one else to compare her to. That's really important. It actually is because, I don't know what her life experiences are going to be, but maybe she herself is not, very sexually accomplished. Um, doesn't matter. I'm not going to have anything to compare that to. It's going to be great no matter what. It's going to be an enjoyable experience that we'll share together and get better at together. It doesn't matter. But the problem is, so many people, they've had, many partners before they find someone that they truly love and that they want to settle down with. Well, then they get married to that person that, Mr. Right, Miss Right, whatever. Um, but then they're in this marriage with Mr. or Mrs. Right, and it isn't what they imagined it would be because they have all these sexual experiences that were just way better with so and so back in the day. And so there's always that little sliver of dissatisfaction that has just stuck itself into that relationship. And so this is where the temptation's always going to be there because there's always going to be a temptation to destroy a marriage. Satan hates marriages. He's going to try to break them up and destroy families. That's what he does. But there's going to be even more of a temptation when you have all this premarital sexual baggage. And there's going to be a temptation, because you're torn between these two worlds. Well, I really love so and so. I care about them. I want to share my life with them. But they're not as good in bed as so and so was that I knew before. And so there's now this temptation, to have things on the side to fill those urges that the spouse is incapable of meeting. And you would have spared yourself all that dissatisfaction to begin with if you had just not slept around before marriage. But something to think about there. So some thoughts for men here. Men, we are supposed to be protecting women, not exploiting them. Something to keep in mind. So some of this might be a little controversial, maybe not, I don't know. It's my thoughts on things. So here's my thoughts on things. Women tend to be what they think men want them to be. So right now, women in society are being pushed to be easy, sexually promiscuous, basically prostitutes in society. And they are being groomed in various ways: pop culture, media, entertainment, the internet, pornography, and other things. They are being groomed to be this way and to present themselves this way. And part of that is they perceive that to be what men want. And a lot of men, let's face it, a lot of men do want that. They want easy sex. So, to some degree, I do blame men for the state of things in society. We're supposed to be the spiritual leaders. That is a role that we have failed at. We have become lazy and degenerate, and the consequences of that are being felt in society. I do think that the West is going to collapse. I'll just be honest about that. I've said that in other videos. I think that there's not only going to be consequence for trends that have been going on for a long time, but I do think that God's specific judgment is going to fall on the West and on the United States for things that have been allowed to continue. And it's not going to be good. So, men, a lot of men in this country, a lot of men, um, have become sex addicted at a young age due to pornography. And I'm going to describe my own experience with pornography. It's going to be an uncomfortable conversation for me. Probably going to be uncomfortable to listen to. If you know me, well, I mean, by all means, if you want to continue listening, I mean, I'm putting this out there for anyone, hopefully because it will be useful and beneficial to someone else. Maybe to a parent who is trying to get some insight into this, or maybe to a woman who doesn't know what it's like being in a man's mind and wants to get a glimpse of how we think, or maybe to a young person who's struggling with this themselves and is asking the question, what's the outcome of this going to be on my life? Well, I don't know. I don't know if I'll be able to give you as much detail, or if I will want to, or I don't know. We'll just talk about it a little bit and see where it goes. But a lot of men are sex addicted at a very young age due to pornography. And I heard recently from a pastor that the stats are like around 90% of society, maybe even higher than that. Um, and it's only, of men in this country are struggling with pornography addictions. So here's my experience with it. I was exposed to pornography at a very young age. I think I was about 7 to 8 years old, somewhere in there. And this was really before the internet was widespread. And it was innocent enough on my part, I guess. And I can't really even blame my parents for this. I mean, life happens, and it's a messy world that we live in. I was with my grandparents and my parents, and we were going around to garage sales in Pennsylvania, backwoods Pennsylvania. And, we were at one of these garage sales. There was a bunch of tables out in the driveway, and there was the garage, and the garage was just stacked up with aisles of boxes. And I just went in there and I was wandering around looking for stuff, like you do at a garage sale. And I came around a corner of one aisle of boxes, and along one side of the garage was just Playboy centerfolds or some other magazine. And I immediately knew that I was seeing something that I really shouldn't look at. Even at that young age, I had an instinct about it that it was dangerous and not right, and it was something that I should avoid. But I also knew that I really wanted to see those images. And to this day, almost 20 years later, some of those images are still burned in my mind. And probably my struggle with pornography has been the greatest moral and spiritual struggle of my entire life. There have been periods here and there where I've gained a measure of victory over it, but I can't say that I've ever 100% rooted out its hold over me. And I'm not even sure if that can be done in modern society or not. And over the course of my lifetime, understand that I grew up. My dad got a computer when I was fairly small. It was running MS-DOS, where you typed everything into that black screen, and it was text. So I saw the internet go from that to what we've got today, and the difference is amazing. But seeing the technology grow and the evil uses of that technology has been absolutely staggering. So, yeah, pornography. It can be insidious, powerful, gripping, something that drags the soul through the mud. and leads to a lot of despair, heartache, depression. Frustration, bitterness. I wish I'd never seen any of that stuff. I wish all the women that I've ever seen in various states of undress had had the common sense to keep their clothes on. The destructive effects that that stuff has on the male mind is impossible to even put into words. I This area is my biggest regret, and at the same time, I'm not honestly sure. I mean, it was always going to be a struggle for me. It's not like I asked to be exposed to that stuff at an early age. And having seen it, it was going to be a struggle. I mean, I'm a man. I am just wired to think certain ways, and I don't say that to excuse, viewing pornography and having that at times addiction. Um, so, my advice to a young person who almost certainly, if I was encountering this stuff at age 7 to 8, I'm sure today kids are encountering it much younger because you have kids who are toddlers and they're being given digital devices. Who knows what they're being exposed to? And understand, even if you're putting them on, YouTube, watching kids programming, there have been situations where weird and disturbing material has been spliced into YouTube channels, and it's not happening on the creator side. It's happening on YouTube side somewhere. Somehow, I've dug into some of this stuff. There's some very disturbing things, even on platforms that should be trusted platforms, so to speak. Now, those of you in my audience who are truthers know that YouTube is a compromised establishment propaganda outlet, and that a lot of what's on YouTube is controlled, and it's intentionally there for purposes of societal molding and stuff. So it really doesn't surprise me that it's a compromised platform, and that programming that's supposed to be, and that term programming is such a loaded word. There's so many levels of meaning there too, but it's no surprise to me that programming that's supposed to be child safe actually isn't, and that material is somehow getting spliced into some of the stuff that content creators are putting up, and then young children are being exposed to it. I have no doubt the kids are getting exposed to porn at age 4, age 5, age 6, before really they can even process what that means. But to a young person, stay away from this stuff if you can. To parents, keep this stuff away from your kids if you can, as long as you can. You're not really going to be able to preserve their innocence very long. That's just the reality of the world we live in, but you should do your best to do so as long as you can. But eventually they are, your kids, your innocent, beautiful children. Well, the reality is we're all born with a sin nature. All of us have a little monster inside of us from birth. But your kids are going to have to struggle spiritually for themselves in this world. It's just the nature of how it is. Protect them from those corrupting influences as long as you can, and then at a certain point you need to prepare them for those corrupting influences and to withstand them. And for women, ladies, I implore you, be modest. God made you beautiful to us men, but that is a beauty that was intended to be a bonding thing in your marriage to your spouse. It was never meant to be shared with the world. It has a corrupting influence when it is spread abroad. I'm not going to pretend that I have all this stuff figured out. I don't. I'm still working through much of this myself. And my perspective on some of these things may be twisted or flawed. That's just the nature of how it is. But I do hope that some of this has been useful to someone listening. And as always, feel free to leave comments. And, well, I will talk to you next time. Have a good one.